Hello learners, welcome back again. I'm Mr. Salim and I'll be teaching you science. So in our today's session, we're going to discuss about the functions of flowers. Now we know that most of the plants do have flowers, right? So these flowers plays a very big role. One, they are the main reproductive organ in a plant. They are reproductive organ in a plant. That's the first thing. The second thing is that they produce seeds. These are the two main functions of flowers. Now let's discuss and see how this really happens. Because if we just say reproductive organ and then what? If it's just producing seeds and then what? We need to discuss and know what exactly happens until we get the seeds and also how they reproduce. Now, normally, when you look at the flower, you can see on the screen, I have this colorful flower. It's really bright, yeah? They're colorful and all that. Now, the colorful part of it is normally called the petals, all right? We normally have what we call petals. Now, the petals in a flower attracts the insects. It attracts the insects. Now, when it attracts the insects, this really helps during pollination. So that means if we don't have the insect, then there won't be any pollination. Why? Because they are part of the pollinators. Mostly, we normally like to see bees flying in different flowers. They are normally looking for something. What do you think they're normally looking for? Is it some money? Do you think they're looking for some food? Yes, they're normally looking for something called nectar. So, in a flower, we have a nectar. It's a sweet juice thing that normally, the bees normally get to use it when making their own honey or making that sweet honey that we normally eat at home. So, the nectars are the sweet juice, that normally is found in a flower, and this is normally used by bees to make honey. Anyway, all this I'm just trying to explain how the insects get attracted to the plant or the flower, and this is also helping in pollination, because without pollination we won't have the reproduction. How does this connect? This connects because we need this what we call pollen. Pollens needs to be transferred from one flower to another or from one plant to another. Now, how does the pollen get transferred? When the insect, or the bees land on a stigma or an anther, okay, let me just show you an anther here. We have an anther, right? Anther is a male part of a flower. We have two male parts of a flower. We have the filament and the anthers. Now, when the bees land on the anthers, as you can see, they normally carry some particles of pollens, and then when they're leaving, they move to the next part of a flower, and mostly they normally land on a stigma, okay? So when they land on a stigma, the pollens normally fall off. We can see we have the anthers, we also have the stigma. So when they move from the anthers, they go to the stigma, the pollens fall off. When the pollens fall off, they'll go, create a tube inside the pollen tube, that is inside the style, going downwards, okay? So after that, this, the pollen tube will develop, will create its own path going downwards, as you can see. So it goes downwards and we get to reach to the part that we also call ovary or ovules, because we also have the ovules inside. Now the ovules is where now the pollen meets with the ovules, and that's where now we get what we call fertilization. That's how fertilization takes place. Now, I just don't want to bombard you with so many information. I just want you to understand one thing is that the petals attract the insects. After that, we get the pollination, right? This pollination helps to transfer the pollens. This nectar I just mentioned, for you to understand what normally attracts the insect. It's the petal and also the nectar. So when they have transferred the pollens normally comes from the anther. Okay? So after carrying these pollens from the anthers, they go to the stigma. It will land on a stigma. Alright? After landing, the pollens will move inside, going down, creating a tube called pollen tube, because it's just a tube that goes down. But then what is passing through is the pollen. So that's why we say pollen tube. Once the pollen reaches the ovules, then there is what we call fusion. So when there is that fusion, that is when now fertilization takes place, which now brings us to the second point of the function of a flower. When after fertilization taking place, we have, let me just state a little bit of it. We have this is the ovules, and outside here we have the ovary. So inside, this is the ovules. This is the ovules. Sorry about that. Let me just clear this. Sorry about that. So inside we have the ovules, and outside we have the ovary. What happens is that this is a flower. This is also part of a flower. I'm sure you have learned about that, right? Now, inside we have the ovules. This ovule is the one that now will develop into a seed, and the ovary is the one that will develop into a fruit. So you can see the fruits that you eat comes from a flower. So it's simply a flower that developed into a seed and also developed into a fruit. I hope it's clear. Now, I just want you to do a simple activity at home. We have two parts. We have the male part, which is very important. We also have the female part, which is very important. I just want you to list the two male parts of a flower and the three parts of a female part of a flower. See you in our next session, inshallah.